Novak Djokovic was asked about the attention around Eala at the Australian Open. Not about a bad match. Not about a bad draw. Not about a normal tennis headline. He was asked about something tennis almost never complains about for very long. Too many people wanted to watch. Too many fans wanted to get close to a court that suddenly felt too small. Too many people cared about a player some casual fans were only beginning to discover. His reported answer was simple. That is a very good problem to have. Stop there for a second. Because in most sports, a problem means something has gone wrong. A schedule is stretched, staff are rushed, fans get frustrated. A venue is not ready for the energy moving toward it. But Djokovic did not treat this like a warning sign. He treated it like a sign of life. And that is what makes this story so unusual. Because the player creating that kind of pressure was not a Grand Slam champion. She was not number one. She was not one of the names that usually forces tournament directors to rethink where a match belongs. Her name is Eala, 21 years old, from the Philippines. Still climbing, still learning, still becoming. And yet, at certain tournaments, she has already become the kind of player who can make a normal court feel too small. Where do you put her? How many people will show up? How loud will they get? What happens when a rising player starts pulling attention before the ranking fully catches up? That is the good problem. And to understand why Djokovic saw it that way, you have to understand how rare this is. By the old rules of tennis fame, Eala should still be building quietly. A good run here, a bigger headline there, a few fans following closely. Maybe a bigger court when the opponent is famous enough. That is the normal path. But her story has not moved normally. At Indian Wells, people around the tournament saw something they could not ignore. Her practice sessions did not feel like normal practice sessions. Fans gathered around the court. Phones came out. People waited. People stayed. A few courts away, some of the biggest names in tennis were also practicing. But for that moment, the energy around Eala made people look twice. That does not mean she had already become bigger than those stars. That would be too simple. It would also be too easy to attack. The truth is more interesting. For a specific moment, at a specific tournament, she created demand that ranking alone could not explain. That is where the story begins. Not with a trophy, with a crowd. And crowds tell tournament directors things rankings cannot always say. A ranking tells you where a player stands on paper. A crowd tells you who people are willing to wait for. A ranking tells you who has earned points. A crowd tells you who has entered the imagination. That is why Eala feels different. She is not only climbing a ladder, she is making people gather around the ladder to see what happens next. The Australian Open showed one version of that. A court that suddenly felt too small for the attention around her. Indian Wells showed another version. A practice court that started to feel like an event. Online clips showed another version. People were clicking. People were sharing. People were asking the question every new sports story needs. Who is she? Why are people this loud for her? Why does this feel bigger than her ranking? The answer is not only tennis. It is history. Eala comes from a country that loves sport deeply, but has not usually seen itself through tennis on this kind of stage. The Philippines has had boxing icons, it has basketball passion, it has national heroes in other arenas. But women's tennis did not have a singles player carrying this level of global attention deep into the biggest conversations of the sport. So when Eala walks onto a court, she is not only another young player trying to win a match, she is carrying a first. And firsts do not behave like normal sports stories. A first brings pride. A first brings pressure. A first brings people who may not know every tennis pattern, but know exactly what it means to finally see one of their own standing there. That is why the noise around her can feel different. Some fans are not only watching a forehand, they are watching a door open. And when a door has been closed for generations, people do not always enter quietly. That is the part tennis has to learn how to handle. Tennis is built on control. Silence before the serve. Polite applause after the point. A long memory of how a crowd is supposed to behave. Eala fans bring something more alive. Flags. Phones. Voices. The feeling of a country discovering that a sport it rarely owned might suddenly belong to it for a few hours. For organizers, that can create pressure. For tennis, it creates opportunity. That is what Djokovic seemed to understand. A bad problem pushes people away. A good problem brings too many people in. A bad problem is an empty seat. A good problem is a court that cannot hold the noise. A bad problem is silence. A good problem is a sport asking how to make more room. That is why this story matters beyond one player. Tennis has spent years trying to create new stars, new audiences, and new reasons to care outside the biggest finals. Every tour wants younger fans. Every event wants global reach. Every broadcast wants a moment that feels alive before anyone has to explain it. Then Eala arrives, and suddenly the problem is not how to make people care. The problem is how to manage the fact that many of them already do. A full court is not a crisis. A full court is currency. It gives cameras energy. It gives sponsors proof. It gives casual fans the feeling that something is happening right now. Every restaurant owner says they want calm operations. But when there is a line outside the door, they know what it means. Demand. The kitchen may be stressed, the staff may be running, the wait may be longer than planned. But nobody looks at a full restaurant and says the dream is failing. They say the dream is working. That is Eala in tennis right now. A line outside the door. Not because she has won everything, because people want to see what she might become. That stage is powerful. It is also dangerous. Because once a player becomes a story, the sport starts treating her differently. The media notices. The draw notices. Opponents notice. Fans stop asking if she can surprise people. They start asking if she can do it again. That is a heavier question. Miami gave the first major answer. In 2025, Eala entered as a wild card and beat 3 Grand Slam champions in one tournament. Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, Iga Swiatek. That was the week people started looking beyond the flag. Because one upset can be explained away. 2 can be called a hot streak. But 3 Grand Slam champions in one tournament is different. That is not just a nice story. That is a warning. It tells the locker room that the player across the net is not afraid of famous names. Still, tennis waited. It always does. Was Miami a miracle week? Was it a one-time flash? Could she still do it when people expected something from her? Then came the hard part. Eastbourne. A final close enough to hurt long after the handshake. Eala had chances. Real chances. The match went all the way to a final set breaker. She lost 6-4, 1-6, 7-6. The breaker ended 12-10. That is not a simple loss. That is a memory. She later said it hurt, she cried. She could not watch the highlights for a long time. That is the part that makes the crowd story more meaningful. People are not only showing up for a highlight machine, they are showing up for someone who has already shown the cost of trying. Miami made her exciting. Eastbourne made her human. Then Wimbledon made her harder to dismiss. At Wimbledon, Eala became the first Filipino singles player to be seeded at a Grand Slam. Seed number 29. That alone would have been historic. Then she faced Iga Swiatek again. This time it was not Miami. It was grass. It was Wimbledon. It was a defending champion across the net. It was the kind of match where a young player either confirms the story or watches the story shrink. Eala won. 7-6, 6-2. That is the difference between noise and evidence. The crowd gave the story emotion. The results gave the emotion something to stand on. And once those two things arrive together, tournaments pay attention in a different way. A player with only crowd energy can become a curiosity. A player with only results can still stay invisible to casual fans. A player with both becomes valuable. That is the deeper meaning behind the good problem. Too many people wanting to watch tennis means the sport has found energy it did not have to manufacture. And now the story moves into the American summer. Washington comes first. Then bigger hard-court stages wait. Cincinnati, New York, the U.S. Open. These are not quiet places. American crowds do not need much permission to get loud. They love emotion. They love a breakthrough. They love feeling early to a story before the rest of the world agrees. That is why Eala arriving in America matters. Not because she is guaranteed to win. That would be the wrong story. The point is that the demand is beginning to travel with her. If fans can crowd around a smaller court in Australia, if they can turn practice in the California desert into an event, if they can turn online clips into discovery moments, then the next question becomes obvious. What happens when that same energy reaches the loudest tennis market in the world? Nobody knows yet. Not Djokovic, not tournament directors, not the players who will see her name in the draw. That uncertainty is what makes the story alive. Maybe she rises fast. Maybe she struggles. Maybe the pressure gets heavier before the next breakthrough comes. But the good problem is already here. Tennis has to decide where to put her. Fans have already decided they want to watch. And that is why this moment feels different. Eala is not just another rising player with a promising ranking. She is proof that a crowd can arrive before the crown. Proof that a country can turn a small court into a national moment. Proof that tennis still has room for a story nobody scripted. So when Djokovic reportedly called it a good problem, he was not dismissing the chaos. He was naming the opportunity: a court too small, a crowd too loud, a schedule under pressure, a young player still becoming who she is supposed to be. That is not a crisis. That is the sound of a sport finding new life. And if this good problem keeps growing on American soil, the next question will not be whether tennis can handle Eala. The next question will be how long tennis can afford not to build around her.